Anthropic, what are you even doing now? Just yesterday, users found that Claude Code has been removed from some of the lower Claude subscription tiers, which is wild. And the way that they're handling their communications in general is confusing to say the least, disingenuous possibly, but certainly not leaving a good taste in the mouths of all the folks who are using Anthropic, including myself. I still love Anthropic models. Opus 4.6, Opus 4.7, these are fantastic models that I use every day, all day. And it's becoming harder and harder to trust Anthropic with my money. They are making it more difficult by the day to get the most out of the quota that I'm paying for. And so I want to talk about how we even got here. And it is all based on one miscalculation by Dario. And we're going to go over that. Anthropic just pulled Claude Code from the Pro plan. Pro users wanting it need max now, $100 a month minimum, 5 times jump in price if you want to play with Claude Code. I'm on the Max 20X, so I'm fine. Flagging it for anyone on Pro who's about to find out. No announcement, just a pricing page edit. And let's look at the page. We have Claude Code, which was removed from the free plan and removed from the Pro plan. They did apparently roll it back. If I go, let's go check actually. Okay, so it looks like it's back in the Pro plan. It is not in the free plan. But we'll come back to this. So for the longest time, Anthropic has been a company with a cult-like culture. They have been hyper-focused on AGI, and there is nothing between them and that. That is the only thing that matters. They don't have side quests, building image models, building video models. They don't really even care all that much about the consumer market. It is all about enterprise and all about coding. And there's a reason for that. They have had one of the best flywheels in the history of business, but their beautiful flywheel seems to be coming off its axle or at least wobbling. And it all comes down to one miscalculation by Dario. All right, I want to talk about this flywheel because it is really incredible. What they have done is incredible. So they build their coding model. It's fantastic. Okay, they focused all their energy on building this incredible coding model. And from there, it allows them to make a bunch of money selling to enterprise AI coding use cases. Then from there, they get 2 things. Obviously, they get the money, but they also get the data, the coding data, okay? This is incredibly important. And so with that coding data, let's just say they have an incredible amount of code that they can build off of, okay? That code is then used to train their next coding model. But here's where it gets really interesting. Every time we see this flywheel occur, every single time, this model over here gets better. The coding model gets better. And as the coding model gets better, it's actually training their next generation of model. This is the most insane flywheel I've ever seen in my lifetime. Probably the most insane flywheel we've ever seen in the history of business, maybe with the exception of Google AdSense, which is the money printing goat. Let's actually change this. It's a little different. I realize I'm missing one important piece. There's something right in between here, which are server racks. Pretend this is a server rack. I am not a good drawer. Okay, so this is a server and they're buying compute. Okay, compute's incredibly important because it allows them to then serve more of their coding model. It allows them to train the next generation of model. But this is also where they had a big problem. The problem today is they don't have enough compute. Their flywheel is breaking down right before our eyes. Okay? Their flywheel breaks down. If they lose this compute, they can no longer serve as much of the coding model. The demand increases for other companies like OpenAI. And that was the big miscalculation that I was referring to. Dario pretty explicitly said they do not want to risk their whole company to buy enough compute to invest the CapEx, and they didn't. And now we can tell, and I'm going to show you a bunch of reasons why that decision is biting them right now. They do not have enough compute to serve their current models, let alone their next generation of models. And while that's happening, they're doing things like limiting quota and pushing people off of awesome agentic projects like OpenClaw. And let me tell you something, OpenAI is eating it up. They are every chance they get using it as a PR dream against Anthropic. All right, so let's watch this clip. This is a clip of Dario on the Dwarkesh podcast, essentially saying he thinks OpenAI actually has a strong likelihood of going bankrupt. And that's the trade-off. That's the calculation or miscalculation that Dario made probably 18 months ago when he had the opportunity, as he was raising a ton of money, to invest and actually build out compute capacity.
But there's a real dilemma here, and where I've settled on it is it will be faster than anything we've seen in the world, but it still has its limits. And so then when we go to buying data centers, you again the curve I'm looking at is okay. We've had a 10x a year increase every year. So beginning of this year, we're looking at 10 billion in annual rate of annualized revenue at the beginning of the year. We have to decide how much compute to buy. It takes a year or two to actually build out the data centers, to reserve the data centers. So basically I'm saying like in 2027, how much compute do I get? Well, I could assume that the revenue will continue growing 10x a year. So it'll be 100 billion at the end of 2026 and 1 trillion at the end of 2027. And so I could buy $1 trillion. Actually, it would be like $5 trillion of compute because it would be $1 trillion a year for 5 years, right? I could buy $1 trillion of compute that starts at the end of 2027. And if my revenue is not $1 trillion, if it's even 800 billion, there's no force on earth. There's no hedge on earth that could stop me from going bankrupt if I buy that much compute. And so even though a part of my brain wonders if it's going to keep growing 10x, I can't buy $1 trillion a year of compute in 2027. If I'm just off by a year in that rate of growth, or if the growth rate is 5x a year instead of 10x a year, then you go bankrupt. And so you end up in a world where you're supporting hundreds of billions, not trillions, and you accept some risk that there's so much demand that you can't support the revenue, and you accept still some risk that you got it wrong and it's still slow. And so when I talked about behaving responsibly, what I meant actually was not the absolute amount. That actually was not. I think it is true we're spending somewhat less than some of the other players. It's actually the other things like, have we been thoughtful about it? Or are we YOLOing and saying, oh, we're going to do $100 billion here, $100 billion there? I kind of get the impression that, some of the other companies have not written down the spreadsheet, that they don't really understand the risks they're taking. They're just kind of doing stuff because it sounds cool.
I think the important parts are him basically saying that OpenAI, there's a chance that they go bankrupt. And it was very clear. He does think they're going to continue growing at that rate, but in the slight chance that they weren't going to grow at that rate, their annual recurring revenue, there was no way for them to prevent bankruptcy. But it turns out they are growing at that rate. And that calculation of, hey, let's not go all in on CapEx, let's not acquire every single ounce of compute we possibly can, was a massive mistake. Because right now, they cannot keep up with their own demand. And two things are happening in parallel because of that. One, they are having a PR and comms nightmare. They are putting a sour taste in so many people's mouths, which I'll go over in a minute. And then at the same time, OpenAI is stepping up like the hero, right? Like the white knight. And they are capturing all of that excess demand that Anthropic cannot service. It's not only that Anthropic has all this revenue and that they're growing so fast. I think they were thinking that they were forever going to be able to rely on their smarts to keep costs down. They have more efficient models. They have less employees. And so what they're thinking is, no, we're going to be able to continue that. And it's okay if we don't have all the compute in the world because our algorithms will continue to get better. But they haven't, or at least they have, and they're not keeping up with demand. And that's the key. That is where this whole thing breaks down. Demand blew past every single projection and continues to increase. And a lot of it is because of agentic engineering. Personally, I'm running 10 agents in parallel all day long, all night long, and it's using up much of their compute. And then we had this huge increase in agentic usage for more kind of normal folks from projects like OpenClaw and Hermes, and those started to get banned. And so that leads us to the second mistake that Anthropic is making right before our eyes right now, which is why I'm saying, what's going on with you, Anthropic? Why are you doing this? And I usually try to be pretty positive. I usually try to be optimistic, but I have been getting frustrated. Maybe not to the point of Anthropic's number one hater, Theo, but it certainly is pissing me off because they're doing everything they can to prevent me from using my tokens that I'm paying them for. I am paying them $200 a month, and they are doing whatever they can to me and to everybody else who uses Anthropic subscriptions to try to prevent me from using my own tokens. So it all started right around the time that OpenClaw came out. And OpenClaw recommended, Peter Steinberger recommended using Opus as your primary orchestration model. Still to this day, it is the best model to use in OpenClaw. It has the best personality. It has the best tool calling. It just does. I know a lot of people are moving to GPT 5.4 for coding. That's great. But you cannot deny OpenClaw works best with Opus. And so out of the box, OpenClaw allowed you to plug in your Claude subscription. But it wasn't clear if that was against their terms of service from the beginning or not. And within a couple weeks, OpenClaw got acquired by OpenAI, and Anthropic started hammering OpenClaw users. First, they had this like back and forth, this weird communication of, yeah, it's allowed, but no, it's not allowed. And okay, it's only allowed if you use the agent's SDK. And yeah, it's just like, it's completely backwards. And it was very confusing. And the way that they're communicating is they put out a public statement, and then some random employee from Anthropic makes a comment or a reply on somebody's tweet clarifying it, but actually making it even more confusing because it's conflicting with the terms of service. And so we're all looking at each other. And by the way, this has been going on for weeks now. We're at probably 2 months, and I still have no idea to this day if what I'm doing with OpenClaw and Claude is actually within their terms of service or not. And they continue to say that they will clarify things, that they're going to clear it up, and they just make it worse. Every single time they make it worse. Let me show you. Okay, so here's the original tweet that started all of the confusion. This is from Tariq Shahipar from Anthropic. This was a reply to someone's post, and this was after they clarified that the Claude subscription is not allowed to be used in third-party harnesses. Okay, OpenClaw is a third-party harness. Apologies. This was a docs cleanup we rolled out that caused some confusion. Nothing is changing about how you can use the Agents SDK and max subscriptions. This was so confusing at the time because nothing is changing. So am I allowed to use my Claude subscription in OpenClaw? And if I'm not using the Claude subscription through OAuth, can I use the Agents SDK? The Agents SDK is their own harness, but then I have to call the Agents SDK through OpenClaw, which actually worked quite well. It worked really well. And so I switched to that for a while. But then it's still not clear. And they never clarified it. He went on, we want to encourage local development and experimentation with the Agent SDK and Claude-P. If you're building a business on top of the Agent SDK, you should use an API key instead. This is really important. If you're building a business, if you have production scale use cases, use the API. But he didn't say you have to. He said you should. And OpenClaw is a personal project. It is not a business. I'm not building a business on top of it. I'm automating my own personal use cases. And so this became even more confusing. We'll make sure that's clear in the docs. Hey, turns out they never did. They never actually made it more clear. The docs say the same thing, and they never clarified it. It's becoming very clear that Anthropic is having compute demand issues. They cannot keep up with compute. In fact, let me just go over to the Claude status page and show you. This is Claude.ai, and they have a 98.8% uptime right now. The fact that they're not even talking about the 0.99, how many nines past the decimal that they have. No, they actually just have a 98.8%. That's wild. Look at all this downtime. Here's platform.claude.com, 99%, but not even close to a single nine past the decimal. We have the Claude API at barely 99%, just nothing but downtime over the last 90 days. And obviously, when I say nothing but downtime, I am talking relative to their competitors. Let me just show you actually. So it's funny, as soon as I show you in this video, we're currently experiencing issues with ChatGPT, but fine. Their API, ChatGPT's API, 99.9% uptime. ChatGPT, 99.8% uptime. Codex, 99.98% uptime. Sora, which, it's probably 100% because it's not used anymore, fine. And then FedRAMP, which I'm not actually sure what that is, 99.91. The important ones are the first three, API, ChatGPT, and Codex. They have phenomenal uptime, especially as compared to Anthropic, which has abysmal uptime. Okay, and all along, while they're trying to manage all of this demand, they are using both the carrot and the stick. They tried the carrot first, and then they brought the stick out. Here's the carrot. Tariq posts, this is on March 14th, 2026. It's spring break for Claude Code. Enjoy 2x usage during off-peak hours. So I'll talk about what those are, and weekends for the next 2 weeks. He goes on to clarify, Claude has been growing incredibly fast recently, and we've hit some bumps along the way. We wanted to thank you for bearing with us while we scaled. I hope you enjoy this alongside a million contexts. Excited to see what you build. Great. Okay. I'm for this. They're using the carrot. They're saying, hey, here's an incentive to use more of your usage outside of peak hours. And in fact, that incentive worked on me. The entire world runs on incentive. So what did I do? I took my OpenClaw and I moved a lot of the workload that could be done asynchronously, and I put it at midnight, and I put it at 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. and just throughout the night for me. And it worked, and it was fine. And I noticed that my quota was depleting less quickly. Great. On March 26, 2026, Tariq posts, to manage growing demand for Claude, we're adjusting our 5-hour session limits for free, pro, max subs during peak hours. Your weekly limits remain unchanged. During weekdays between 5 a.m. and 11 a.m. Pacific, okay, you'll move through your 5-hour session limits faster than before. No clarity on how much faster. No clarity on how the different products or the different models move through the quota more quickly. Just a generic statement. You got to use more of your quota. And this is the most frustrating part with me. If you're going to have policies, just be clear with them. This is something that I cannot stand when companies do, and Anthropic seems to be guilty of it more so than any other company I've ever seen. So here he goes on, and he specifically points out who this will be affecting. And once again, we know who it is. We've landed a lot of efficiency wins to offset this, but 7% of users will hit session limits they wouldn't have before, particularly for pro tiers. 7% of users. Who do we think he's talking about here? Who are those 7% of users? Well, it's OpenClaw users. It's agentic harness users. That's who it is. Okay? He is punishing people for using third-party harnesses. If you run token-intensive background jobs, shifting them to off-peak hours will stretch your session limits further. Overall weekly limits stay the same, just how they're distributed across the week is changing. He's punishing the 7%, and that number sounds about right. 7% of us are on the frontier of how we're using coding agents, how we're using agentic harnesses like OpenClaw and Hermes. 7%, okay? And that's who is getting punished by this policy. Now, I will remind you again, these are tokens we're paying for. These are tokens we have already paid for. Yet, we can't use them. They are making it increasingly difficult to use our own tokens that we pay for. But then they started doing something that really angered me. This happened on April 3rd, 2026. And if you're not familiar with what April 3rd was, it was the Friday at 4 p.m. on a Friday on Easter weekend, a holiday weekend. And here's what they said. Starting tomorrow at 12 p.m. Pacific, Claude subscriptions will no longer cover usage on third-party tools like OpenClaw. You can still use these tools with your Claude login via extra usage bundles, now available at a discount, or with the Claude API key. What? It doesn't even make sense. I can't use my Claude subscription, but can I use the Agents SDK? They didn't even mention that because previously they said the Agents SDK was okay to use with third-party harnesses, but now it's even more confusing. And I can use the Claude login, but I have to turn on extra usage. How does that affect my pricing? They give basically zero transparency on how the quota actually gets used. The only thing they're going to say is stuff like, you're going to use more quota now, or you're going to use less quota during these hours. And it's just so confusing. It's so opaque. So Boris continues, we've been working hard to meet the increase in demand for Claude, and our subscriptions weren't built for the usage patterns of these third-party tools. Usage pattern of these third-party tools. You know what he's talking about. I know what he's talking about. He's talking about agents. He's talking about OpenClaw. And why not? Those are my tokens. I'm paying you for tokens. How I use my tokens should be my business. It does not make sense that they're talking about it like that. The only way that this would make sense is if they did the calculation that, okay, somebody's paying us $200 a month. We're giving them X tokens, but we're assuming they're using fewer than X tokens. Our business model is predicated on them using less tokens than they're paying for, which is not really abnormal. A lot of businesses are built like that. Think about subscriptions at car washes. You are paying them and they're assuming that you are not going to use enough to cost them more than their subscription, right? That is the entire business model. But it just is different here. I'm paying for my tokens. I want to use my tokens, and they are enforcing it at a policy level that I can't use all of my tokens. And they're pushing you towards doing things manually. And when I say manually, I mean questions and answers in Claude AI, maybe a little bit of usage in Claude Code, but certainly you're not going to use their tokens outside of Claude Code. So they tried to make up for it. Subscribers get a one-time credit equal to your monthly plan cost. If you need more, you can now buy discounted usage bundles. Okay. Now, this last statement doesn't really make a lot of sense given their communications. Okay. We want to be intentional in managing our growth to continue to serve our customers sustainably long-term. This changes steps towards that. And now here's the thing that they always do. Okay. Eric Buse says subs can still be used for personal local tools that use or wrap the Claude harness like Claude Code and Claude Code Headless and Agent SDK, right? Boris says, yep, working on improving clarity here to make it more explicit. This was April 3rd. It is now April 22nd. Let me let you guess if they clarified it. Obviously, the answer is no. There's no clarity. We have no idea what's allowed and what's not allowed. How is it taking so long? This is the big frustrating thing that Anthropic does. They put out some random policy change. We have to react as quickly as we can to it. It's not quite clear what it means. They say, here's some clarity. It's not any more clear. And then they say, we're going to clear it up even more soon. And then they never do. That's their spiel. That's their MO. I don't get it. And during this PR nightmare that Anthropic is self-inflicting, OpenAI is loving it. And I have so many examples of this. And here's one. So April 7th, right around the same time, Sam Altman tweets, to celebrate 3 million weekly Codex users, we are resetting usage limits. They have been resetting usage limits for anything. If the sky is blue one day, they reset your usage limit in Codex. They are putting their foot on the neck of Anthropic on the comms and kind of just the overall vibes front. We will do this every million users up to 10 million. Happy building. Unreal. And by the way, this isn't a one-off tweet. The OpenAI team has reset limits so many times over the past 2 months. And of course, they acquired Peter Steinberger, okay, the creator of OpenClaw, and they are very pro OpenClaw, pro open source, maybe not overall as a model company, but certainly as a software company. OpenAI seems to be very open source friendly. And so they acquired Peter Steinberger. They allow you to use your Codex subscription in OpenClaw, no problem. To be frank, it doesn't quite work as well as Opus, but I never have to worry about changing policy. I never have to worry about them pulling the rug out from under my feet. And so that brings us to yesterday, where they did the thing again. They ran an experiment, and according to them, only 2% of users saw a new pricing page with Claude Code removed from both the free tier and the pro tier. Here it is, free tier, pro tier, Claude Code removed. Why can't you use Claude Code? You're paying for the tokens. Why can't I use it? I don't understand. Just limit my quota, give me clarity on what my quota is, but let me use those tokens in any way I want. It not only doesn't make sense because it puts a sour taste in my mouth, but it doesn't even make sense from a product strategy or a company strategy perspective. They want as many people using Claude Code as possible. If somebody at the free tier or the pro tier wants to use their very limited tokens inside Claude Code, let them. That might be the inspiration for that person to build something cool in their very limited quota budget and then go to pay you a lot more, to pay you directly through the API, to go to the max plan. What could possibly be the logic to stop people from using Claude Code with their Claude subscription? Here's Amal, who is the growth person at Anthropic, to clarify their position. And they did the thing again. For clarity, we're running a small test on about 2% of new prosumer signups. Existing pro and max subscriptions aren't affected. He goes on to say, when we launched Max a year ago, it didn't include Claude Code, Cowork didn't exist, and agents that run for hours weren't a thing. Max was designed for heavy chat usage, that's it. But again, if you have a quota, you should be able to use the quota any way you want. And their thinking was, you're going to pay for the quota and you are unlikely to use all of it. And then all of a sudden, all of these products, agentic coding and OpenClaw, started coming out, allowing you to use all of your quota, the quota that you're paying for. And now they're trying to prevent you from doing it. And he's basically admitting that right here. So since then, we bundled Claude Code into Max, and it took off after Opus 4. Cowork landed, long-running async agents are now everyday workflows. The way people actually use a Claude subscription has changed fundamentally. So what? Increase the price, lower the quota, be clear about it. But to revoke access to certain tools doesn't make sense to me. Engagement per subscriber is way up. How did they not predict this? This is that demand that I said that they miscalculated. There is insane demand for tokens, and that was the big miscalculation that we talked about earlier in the video. They didn't invest enough in compute, and now they are scrambling to figure out what to do. We've made small adjustments along the way, weekly caps, tighter limits at peak, but usage has changed a lot, and our current plans weren't built for this. Again, admitting that they planned on you never using the quota that they allotted to you. Crazy. So we're looking at different options to keep delivering a great experience for users. We don't know exactly what those look like yet. That's what we're testing and getting feedback on right now. When we do land on something, if it affects existing subscribers, you'll get plenty of notice. Not true. Not true. Remember OpenClaw getting that email at 4 p.m. on a Friday and having less than 24 hours to change off of Opus within OpenClaw? Remember that? We didn't get plenty of notice. That's BS. You will hear it from us, not a screenshot on X or Reddit. And then, by the way, Sam Altman was drunk last night and drunk tweeting, and it was hilarious. He just replies, okay, boomer. So while Anthropic is shooting themselves in the foot on the PR side, on the comm side, again, like I said, OpenAI is eating it up. They're loving it. Let me show you a few examples. Here's Thibaut from the Codex team. Ready? I don't know what they're doing over there, but Codex will continue to be available both in the free and plus $20 a month plans. We have the compute and efficient models to support it. A big claim for a while was that Anthropic had much more efficient models. I think they did, but maybe OpenAI has increased their efficiency at this point. For important changes, we will engage with the community well ahead of making them. I mean, Anthropic didn't even mention engaging with the community. It just said giving us a lot of heads up, and they still don't do that. Transparency and trust are two principles we will not break, even if it means momentarily earning less. A reminder that you vote with your subscription for the values you want to see in this world. Man, he's going for the throat. Thibaut, what a tweet. What a tweet. This is from last night. Also, we want you to have a lot of AI. This is, I think, as Sam was starting to get a little tipsy, but I'll come back to that. Let me come back to Sam's tweets. And of course, Rohan from the Codex team also had to get a dig in. For clarity, we are running a small test for 100% of Codex users where we make our best models available to all users, make Codex available to all plans, free and paid. Claude Code users aren't affected. Ooh. And then Sam Altman, this is kind of peak Sam Altman drunk tweet. How about a rate limit reset in a week or so? Just continuing to throw salt on the wound. My goodness. And then, of course, Thibaut, get the button ready. So good. It's so good. It's becoming a meme that Thibaut just resets quotas for any reason. They're looking for a reason. You know, I actually just thought of something. A lot of people gave OpenAI shit for talking about rolling out ads within ChatGPT. Now, of course, that was for free users only. I think they had a Go plan for $8 a month that would be at least partially subsidized by advertising. And so many people did not like that. There was such a negative reaction to that. And only in this moment, I'm starting to realize maybe it wasn't so bad after all. They're trying to get the maximum amount of people to use artificial intelligence. The majority of the world cannot afford even the $8 a month plan, let alone 20, 100, 200. The majority of the world cannot afford that. And so they're trying to get the best models. They're trying to get the best AI tools in the hands of the maximum amount of people in the world, where at the same time, Anthropic took out Super Bowl ads to effectively talk crap on OpenAI and their plans to roll out ads. But I think that's the culture difference. OpenAI wants AI for the world. Now, whatever you think about that, since they're not really open sourcing their models, fine. Anthropic is definitely on the other side of the spectrum. They have all closed source models. They don't open source anything they do. And in fact, with Mythos, they're not even releasing the model publicly, at least not yet. So they have a very different approach to artificial intelligence, a very selective approach. They are kingmakers. They are going to choose who gets to use the model. And I think that strategy is going to hurt them in the long run. All right, let's look at Sam Altman's tweets from last night. Here he's saying, tonight I have had a couple of drinks to Kylie Robison. The only, I think she actually puts it in her, Robison. Okay. The only relatable thing any of these tech CEOs have done is tweet while they're inebriated. Really think they should center their comms around this. Tonight, I've had a couple of drinks, replying to, look at this. So he said, Amal, I think we talked about this, but, he's talking about that 2% test. And he says, okay, boomer, which, it's not even funny, but it's funny that it's coming from Sam, I guess. Here's something crazy. He basically drunk confirmed that the new version of GPT 5.5 is coming Thursday, right? So here, Dennis says, if you release 5.5 or 6 Thursday, I'm on my way. And we get the salute emoji from Sam Altman. So likely coming tomorrow. By the way, I will be live streaming if it drops tomorrow. And if you want to see it, subscribe, make sure you follow me, do all that good stuff. Be here tomorrow because I will be. And we'll be testing it together. I'll be talking about it. Okay, let's get back to what we're talking about. The public reactions have not been good. Here's Jeremy Howard For the small test, they've modified their docs to remove mention of Claude Code, and in Claude Pro, it's been a shock to see Anthropic's integrity collapse in the face of commercial pressure. Would love a renewed commitment to straightforward honesty. We have number one Anthropic hater in the world, Theo, a small test on 2% of users. Quote, I've rolled it every time. Every person I've talked to has rolled it every time. Either they are lying or the experiment was implemented incorrectly, mind clarifying, and tagged Amal. He went on to say, I just signed up for a new pro tier account, probably just to test things, and I can still use it in Claude Code. The sign up page did not indicate this. The checkout page did not indicate this. When I clicked, I want to develop during onboarding, it sent me to the Claude Code install script, and it worked as expected with my new account. Okay. All right. Then we get to another level of issue. They rolled out Opus 4.7. A lot of people say it's a regression compared to Opus 4.6. I like it, okay? I still love the Opus family of models. I still use it all the time, especially Opus 4.6 fast. But then they rolled out Opus 4.7. And Boris from Anthropic clarified or said, Opus 4.7 uses more thinking tokens, so we've increased rate limits for all subscribers to make up for it. Great. But it's not only that it uses more thinking tokens, they actually have a new tokenizer. And the way that they process the tokens makes it use between 1 and 1.35x more tokens on the same query. In addition to it using more thinking tokens, which I think these are two separate things, and of course it's not clear, but they also have a new tokenizer. So first, Opus 4.7 uses an updated tokenizer that improves how the model processes text. The trade-off is that the same input can map to more tokens, roughly 1 to 1.3x, depending on the content type. Yes, it is separate. It says it right here. Second, Opus 4.7 thinks more at higher effort levels, particularly on later turns in agentic settings. This improves reliability on hard problems, but it does mean it produces more output tokens. So in the face of this massive compute crunch, they do two things which make it worse. They roll out a model with a new tokenizer, causing about 35% more tokens. Okay. Then they also roll out a new model, the same model, that uses more thinking tokens. And so they're just doing themselves no favor on the compute crunch that they are so clearly in. And so that same quota that you're battling for, that you're having to beg Anthropic for, you're going to be going through it more quickly now. And there's nothing you can do about it. So I want to talk a little bit about the economics of all of this now. This was actually brought up, I believe Jonah from my team kind of brought this up, and it was a really good point. So I'm going to talk about it. Let's include it in this video. So here is what is also happening at the same time as everything else. They are having severe commercial pressure. They are in between a rock and a hard place. They have a frontier coding model, but ultimately they are selling tokens at a loss. Every single token they sell is at a loss. And of course, that means their business is operating at a loss. Now, this isn't abnormal. Amazon for years did this. Uber for years did this. This is traditional VC-backed subsidization of consumer spend. Okay, so they're selling every single token at a loss, and power users are the ones that they're losing the most money on. People like us, the ones that are using OpenClaw, the ones that are using Claude Code aggressively. That's who they're losing money on. And then compounded with their compute shortage, they're in this weird place. They can't raise their prices. That would be one of the solutions, but they can't do it. Because what happens if they raise their prices? People are just going to go to OpenAI. They're going to go to Codex. So they can't raise prices, and they also can't serve the demand they have. Regardless of which direction they go in, people are moving to Codex, and that's very clear. Codex user growth is skyrocketing right now. It's not Claude Code level, but it's getting there. And so all of these half measures is what we're seeing. OpenClaw ban, quota manipulation, lack of transparency into usage, lack of clarity into what is within policy and what's not. That's what we're seeing. Those are the half measures. They are effectively price increases without actually being honest about it. Now, OpenAI is in the same boat. Okay, they're losing money on every token, but they have been much more aggressive on CapEx spend to try to build out more compute. They have acquired more compute. They have more compute overall. Let's look it up. Let's see if we can find it. All right. I think this is accurate. Let's see. OpenAI versus Anthropic compute wars. This is through 2026. Compute in gigawatts. On the y-axis, we have timeline on the x-axis. And as you can see, OpenAI has, for the life of these companies, had more compute than Anthropic. There was a brief period towards the end of 2025 where it's clear that Anthropic unlocked a massive amount of new compute, but then so did OpenAI. And you can just see it doesn't really look like the gap is closing. OpenAI just has more compute. And in fact, they just announced another deal where they're acquiring more compute. In fact, Anthropic also announced a compute deal with AWS just recently, I think a day ago. But those compute deals won't come to fruition. You won't start to see those until later this quarter at the very earliest. And I want to actually take a moment to talk about how each of these companies are faring. Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, and now xAI on this like compute versus demand spectrum. And of course, I'm going to break out drawings again. So we have this spectrum. On one side, we have compute rich, and on the other side, we have demand. And where you want to fall on this is right in the middle, okay? You want an equal amount compute with an equal amount of demand, okay? So over here on this side, we have xAI. They have a ton of compute. They aggressively built out the fastest 0 to 100,000 GPU server farm in history. I think it took 18 months. Something like that, some ridiculous number. But their models weren't that good, or they were good, they weren't as good. They weren't as good as Anthropic. And so people, although they were using it and they built out all this compute, it wasn't enough demand to match all of that compute. Okay, that's why you just saw the deal yesterday with Cursor, which I'll talk about in a moment. On the other side, we have Anthropic. Anthropic has all the demand. They have too much demand, but they don't have enough compute to serve all of that demand. Okay, so those are the two ends of the spectrum. Now let's start going towards the middle. Now on this side, compute rich doesn't even give it enough credit, but they also have a lot of demand, and that's Google. Google has so much compute that they are selling TPUs. They are running inference for their competitors, Anthropic, and they're also serving their Gemini family of models. They have enough compute to do all of it. They don't go down. They don't have downtime. That is insane. That is insane to think about, that they have enough compute to fulfill all of those different obligations, where every other company either can't get enough compute to run their models or are trying to get enough compute and are barely scraping by. Gemini and Google at the same time, they're saying, we're good. We got enough for everything we need. Plus, we're going to go ahead and sell our TPUs and just make a ton of money along the way. Okay, so we have Google there. And then, of course, the last one, we have OpenAI. OpenAI has a ton of demand. They definitely have more compute than Anthropic, less compute than Google, but they're not suffering. They can use more, but they're not absolutely being destroyed and making poor decisions because of their insane skew between demand and supply. I need two axes. I know. I should have done it a little bit differently. I should have made it more like this, right? Where it's compute over here, demand over there. But I don't want to refilm that whole part. So you got to live with it. Okay. But Anthropic is not sitting still. All right. Anthropic just announced 2 days ago, Anthropic and Amazon expand collaboration for up to 5 gigawatts of new compute. They're using Trainium from Amazon, AWS. They're using their other chips to serve their models. And so they're not sitting still. They're trying to acquire it. But these types of deals, when they're announced, only become available to serve demand months later. We are committing more than $100 billion over the next 10 years to AWS technologies, securing up to 5 gigawatts of new capacity to train and run Claude. Spans Graviton, Trainium 2 through Trainium 4 chips, with the option to purchase future generations of Amazon's custom silicon as they become available. But in the interim, before they can service their demand, that demand is going elsewhere and it's going to OpenAI. And I actually want to take a slight detour just for a moment and talk about this news that came out yesterday. SpaceX, and Cursor are now working closely together to create the world's best coding and knowledge work AI. The combination of Cursor's leading product and distribution to expert software engineers with SpaceX's million H100 equivalent Colossus training supercomputer will allow us to build the world's most useful models. So remember that spectrum that I just showed you? We had XAI, SpaceX AI on one end, and they have an enormous amount of compute, but not enough demand. Well, Cursor has a ton of demand, and they're paying for it. Now, they don't have their own models, or at least they don't have their own frontier model yet, but maybe they will now. And I actually think this SpaceX AI X Cursor acquisition is very smart. They acquire the best coding data set in the world. They acquire people who know how to train models, even though they also have that. And they can immediately start serving and start utilizing a lot of the capacity that they have that they're not using today. The worst feeling in the world for Elon and for the XAI team is knowing that your compute that you spent so much money on, that you work so hard to stand up, is sitting there idle. It is a horrible feeling. It's similar to a feeling that I get when my agents are not running. And maybe you feel that way as well. Cursor has also given SpaceX the right to acquire Cursor later this year for $60 billion or pay $10 billion for our work together. So that's going to be great. Good for them. Shout out Cursor. They hook it up with tokens for me. They don't sponsor any of my videos, but I just love using them. And so let me wrap this up. It all comes back to that original sin by Dario. He miscalculated, he underestimated the amount of AI demand that there was going to be and how fast it was going to grow. Sam Altman, on the other hand, did not. And he actually put his entire company at risk of going bankrupt because he had such conviction about the growth of artificial intelligence. And it turns out Sam was right, Dario was wrong. And in this moment, this is the moment in which OpenAI is going to capture a lot of that demand. Anthropic is pissing off people. OpenAI is doubling down. They're capturing all the demand. They are pouncing on every opportunity, every misstep that Anthropic makes, and I'm here for it because it helps us, consumers, prosumers, enterprise users. We're the ones who benefit from all of this competition. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, that's the vid.